Well, I think inspiration can be very broad. It can be a person, it can be a book, it can be an activity, it can be something you do just to kind of center yourself. It can be friends, it can be family, anything that's kind of keeping you going in these, what we know are very rough times. And
And
certainly,
yeah, I was going to say, if you'll throw in the next slide,
yeah, 1 second.
I have something that inspires me. So this is a Columbus poet, Saeed Jones. And so on election day, he did this lovely blog post about, what was going on. And he had this line: I believe that if the country really is a house on fire, we choose to live out our lives here because we are water. And I've often thought, when it comes to all of the changes and worries and things that aren't quite working in democracy, we are water. And I love, Marie says she's inspired by her kids and their friends. I do think, like, the looking for an opportunity for the next generation to run for office. Oh, Heather Cox Richardson, I love. Kelly, do you have things you want to share?
I actually already put it in the chat, and I just think it's pretty inspiring that now there's 83 of us on this call this morning. So coming from a person who is not a morning person. So thanks for all joining.
Yeah, it is inspiring that there are so many of us, and we are going to hold each other up. And
Mia, somehow you're muted.
sorry. Yeah, just saying that it's inspiring that there are so many of us and that we're sticking with it, and that we're not, we're not going anywhere, and that is definitely inspiring. So yeah, I will be kind of muting everyone as they come in. So if just give you that heads up. Catherine, should I?
Yeah, why
Are you
don't you
ready for me
move
to?
along? But I highly encourage, as we're going through this, to be thinking about, like, what is it that's worrying us? And then also, like, well, what are the things that can inspire us, keep us going? And we have some actions that people can take and things that people can do throughout and at the end of this. And also that, this is really, I'm hoping, a conversation. So the agenda is pretty simple. We'll talk a little, this is the 15th anniversary of Citizens United. I figured an update on House Bill 6 made sense, and also some ways that you can kind of take action, because I feel like it's been this drip, drip, drip. Larry Householder was arrested in July of 2020, and it's 2025. I also thought, it's important to talk about kind of open government and transparency. We focused in this area, you'll notice I'm going from state government, state government to federal. And so we'll talk about redistricting that happens this year. Then we're going to talk about kind of some of the things that have happened so far in the Trump administration and some things we can do. And then we're going to talk about kind of voting and elections, because as we know, every year is a year to vote. And so I'm just incredibly happy that you have joined us all today. And so why don't we get it kicked off? For anybody who's a little late to the party, please throw in your name and where you're from. What you're worried about, what you're concerned about, and what's inspiring you. All right. So, usually when we celebrate an anniversary, This is one of those anniversaries to commemorate. Many of us will remember in 2010 when the US Supreme Court determined that corporations had First Amendment rights, and that because of previous decisions, including Buckley versus Vallejo in 1976, that essentially said, money is the gas that makes the car of a campaign go, that money was equivalent or was essentially free speech. And so essentially the US Supreme Court determined that corporations have First Amendment rights, just like people. And that decision was really problematic. But one of the things that they said at the same time was that there was a right and a benefit, and it was constitutional to have good disclosure and transparency. Unfortunately, in the past 15 years, we haven't actually managed to get better transparency passed so that we can actually follow all the money, figure out who the donors are to all of the different advertisements, track who is trying to influence us. And there's lots and lots and lots of dark money in our elections. And so I highly encourage you, to take some time to watch this video with Lisa Graves from True North Research, talking about kind of the history that led up to Citizens United, which she calls Billionaires United, and to think about, okay, we have come this far. It can be really hard. The more and more entrenched a system becomes, the harder it can be to take action. And there's so much other stuff, the urgency of now, there's so much other stuff, but it's important to think about what can we do to continue to urge the state legislature to create greater transparency at the state house, create better disclosure so that we can follow the money in all elections. And so, Mia, if you're willing to move to the next slide. I did want to highlight this update from the House Bill 6 scheme on January 2017. So, just a couple weeks ago, the SEC announced that American Electric Power, which, as they are one of the utilities companies that had a dark money group called Empowering Ohio, that in fact they had lied to their investors about their dark money group, that they had engaged in some shenanigans to advance the House Bill 6 scheme, and that they were required to pay $19 million because of that. And, I think this is incredibly important because they have managed essentially to let First Energy take the brunt of absolutely everything. Now, clearly, First Energy was the leading bad guy in this scheme, but they weren't the only ones. They weren't the only utility company. And certainly the lack of transparency in dark money means that lying to voters, lying to the public, but it also means lying to investors. And the dark money, that dark money corruption is all tied up, with an impact not just on our government, but also on, corporate governance and them being good partners as well. And then the other thing that happened on January 17th, I think Red Banner Day, is that former First Energy CEO Chuck Jones and their former essentially chief lobbyist, that was not his title, Mike Dowling, were indicted on federal racketeering charges. And so that means that they are now not just facing state charges for their actions in the bribery scandal, they are in fact facing federal racketeering charges as well. And so, one of the things I wanted to highlight is we do have this timeline, so you can go through and actually, follow the whole thing. If you're somebody who's like, I really want to take a deep dive, I want to get to know all the things that happen, you can also do that. And I also wanted to highlight, Mia, if you're willing to move to the next page, that we put together, this is front and back of a one pager that we put together. So this is something that we created, and we're hoping you will help us distribute. It really is House Bill 6 by the numbers. This is one of those scandals that is incredibly complicated. Mia's showing it off. So if you can find her picture, she's showing it off. This is one of those scandals that's incredibly complicated, and we wanted to be able to break it down. And purposely complicated. They created multiple dark money groups in order to subvert our ability to have reasonable rates They did it so that they could line their pockets. I think it's important for us to do what we can to break it down. And the number that I think is the most important here is the zero bills. Zero bills. And also that we continue to pay. That yes, most of House Bill 6 is gone, but we still subsidize those coal plants to the tune of 445,000 plus change every single day. Mia, anything you want to
And-
add?
Well, folks are asking if we're going to send a follow-up. Yes, we are, and you'll get links to all of these. But this particular handout, we have printed copies. So we have a link that we'll share where you can essentially order copies that we will mail to you or bring to you if you're close by, so that you can help us distribute these. And we don't have a link to this graphic right now, but we will send stuff in the follow-up.
I mean, I was going to say, I'm going to share this again, but you'll find in the form, oh, Kelly did too. In that form, you'll actually also find the graphic.
Awesome.
Any other questions or thoughts about Citizens United? I know we're a big group, so it can be hard, but please, throw your thoughts into the chat.
I'm wondering if the federal charges are going to be dropped now, and I guess we don't know yet.
So it is a good question. We don't know yet. One of the things that we do know is that Larry Householder, former Speaker of the House, has in fact asked Donald Trump to pardon him. It is possible there will be, because of the changes at the U.S. Justice Department, it is possible that those charges will be dropped. I am hopeful that these kind of crimes will not be dropped, that in fact they will continue their investigations, though, and continue their work. But of course, that is a real possibility. One of the things that is important is that there also are those state charges against the two First Energy folks. And the Security and Exchange Commission tends to be a little bit more independent. One of the things that I think is really challenging right now, you would say the same thing about the Justice Department, that more independent. We're just in unprecedented times, but what we can continue to do is talk about the villains, talk about the consequences for us and for people who have fewer resources than we do, and that we can really highlight the harm and push back on letting off criminals.
Absolutely. To highlight the impact to people. There have been a couple of questions that I'm going to answer here. So the total cost that Ohio utility customers have paid so far, that have shelled out as part of this bailout, is $400 million. And they are paying that at a rate of $445,679 per day to subsidize these coal plants. So there really are some startling numbers on here. And regardless of how much corruption we know is coming down from the very top, we still have to talk about this and emphasize this and make sure that people know how it's impacting them.
Well, and Sue Miller was highlighting that Open Secrets is a great nonprofit. Open Secrets essentially used to be the Center for Responsive Politics and the State Institute for Money in Politics. They joined forces a few years ago and created Open Secrets. And so they do a lot of following the money as best they can to look at both federal level stuff as well as state stuff. And so I highly encourage you to check them out. David says First Energy ought to have their charter revoked. Hear, hear. For anybody who's wondered about that $445,679, that is something that we got from the Ohio Consumer Council. So that's where that number comes from. It's on their front page. You have to scroll past. There's like a video there, but you can scroll past and go a little bit lower.
And just because we have kind of a packed agenda, is it okay if I move along?
Oh yeah, I think that makes sense. The one thing I know is we're not going to hit everything. There's just so much. There's so much going on. We will get together again next month. We'll try to figure out ways to cover different topics. And now we're going to talk about attacks on open government. In this case, we're going to be talking a little bit about what's happening at the State House. One of the things that we know is that following Watergate, at the national level, we created FOIA, or the Freedom of Information Act. We created this opportunity to get closer information, to do public records requests, go to meetings, so that we could in fact hold our government accountable. And then in the States, we did good sunshine law, or open records and open meetings law. And Ohio should be really proud. We actually have really decent open meetings laws, including something that stops round robins, meaning two people getting together and then a different two, and like somehow avoiding getting a meeting all at the same time. But we also know that open meetings are really hard to put into practice. And then things do go wrong and we don't get good access to information. And we know that open records can also be a real challenge, and there's a real attack on that. We know that those records help us figure out what happened behind the scenes, helps us decision making. And so if you are willing to move ahead, Mia, why don't you tell them a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, well, one thing that happened at the very end of the, during lame duck at the end of the previous General Assembly, as happens during lame duck, sometimes things that are not really related get tacked on to other bills. And an amendment was added to a bill, HB 315, towards the very end of the session, late at night, no public notice, no hearings. And it made a very significant change to Ohio Sunshine Law. And what it does is it allows police and also correctional departments to charge up to $750, $75 an hour per record for body cam and dash cam recordings. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but let's say you have an incident and there's 3 police cars that each have a dash cam, and there's 7 police officers, each with a body cam. So that's 10 cameras. So that's 7,500 right there. So, and there's no exception for victims, their families, their attorneys, and even, to my mind, more worrying, there's no guidance or stipulations or regulations or rules about how those dollars can be collected and how they can be spent and how they can be tracked. So what's to prevent a police department from using this as a cash cow? You have the incident that I just described, which has many different cameras. It's, one news outlet wants it, another news outlet wants it. Officially, this is for compiling the footage, so they shouldn't necessarily charge for the next sharing it again and again, but how do we know that they wouldn't? So you could end up with police departments using this as a way to make money when, in fact, we have the rules about dash cams and body cams for a specific reason, which is that we want to know. We have the right to know. It's a public record. It's sunshine. That the whole reason that those things are there is to prevent the police saying something happened when it actually something different happened. So this is very worrying, and it's worrying that it passed in this way. Again, just in the dark of night, as it were, and it's a crack in the wall. So if they can charge money for these records, what is to say that they wouldn't begin to charge money for other records? Common Cause and a number of other organizations wrote to Governor DeWine asking him not to sign the bill, but he did sign the bill. Now, one thing that can be done is that local city councils, local entities, government entities, police departments, they can say, this isn't a required charge, it's an allowed charge. And they can basically say, well, we are not going to charge. We're not going to charge for newspapers. We're not going to charge for individuals. We're not, basically we're going to continue to offer this without a charge. So that's what, and some entities are already doing that. So that's what we're encouraging people to do, government entities to do, is to say, we will not be charging for these fees. But it's something that we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of and that, we can follow. Any questions about that? I'm not looking at the chat right now. Let's see.
The one
did
thing that
sign,
I
yeah.
would highlight again
Yeah.
is this part. It allows them to
Yes.
charge.
Yes.
So allowing them to charge is not the same as requiring them to charge.
Yeah, I mentioned that. And Bill, I think that's yes, you should have a strategy for urging localities not to pass. I think that is a very, very good strategy.
And I think the
News
challenge
would have to pay that money for now if they wanted the footage, but again, any police department or entity can say, we're not gonna do that. For example, in Cleveland, they actually did already say that. They said they would not be charging news organizations for footage. This is Denise, this is for footage from police body cams and dash cams.
And I do think, the challenge is working with, all across Ohio, urging, police departments, city councils to make sure that they aren't, in fact, assessing these fees.
Yep.
And it is scary to think about, if they do this for, body cam footage, what else are they likely to do? Because they're not getting the copy copy charges aren't a thing anymore. So much of the information that the public's requesting is electronic.
Yeah.
And so that argument that the public should pay to compile their own records is really wrong.
I'm going to go on to the next page. I see the, there's a few questions. I'll try to address some of them. But let's move on. Actually, this is me again. I'm going to tell you again, this is, these things that we kind of report on that we're still kind of taking in. But this is a new rule that House Speaker Matt Huffman has kind of set out for the operation of the new General Assembly, the 136th General Assembly. He kind of issues these rules, and they have to do with basically public access to what's going on at the State House. So all of these things, you can read them. Committee amendments don't need to committee reports don't need to include amendments. The session calendar can be set in. We used to have 24 hours that we would know when a committee was meeting and access to the information. And that basically has been rescinded. And the other thing that Huffman has done is said that the area outside of the House chamber, like at the top of the stairs, that little space before the folks go into the chamber, that will be closed during session so that people don't have access there. And all of this just shuts us out and makes it more difficult for us to advocate, write testimony, show up, give testimony, tell people what's happening. It's a way of kind of having them be able to just push things through without without any public participation. So Wenda pointed out that Rachel Coyle is 100% on top of State House stuff. Absolutely. You know, her view is that we have become so successful at pushing back that this is a response to how successful we've been, in the sense that we're on it. We've got people there with testimony. We've got them there, you know, ready to try to talk to their legislators at the last minute. And this is a way of kind of keeping us out. There is a large letter, and you will see, if you go to the link, I'm sure Kelly's dropped it in the chat there. There's a sign-on letter that's both for organizations and for individuals. If you click on it, you should see the whole list of organizations that have signed and the list of individuals that have signed. You can still, I think they're going to send it very soon. So if you're interested in signing, I would do it very quickly. You know, pushing back against these rules and saying that they don't allow us to participate in democracy in a, you know, in a functional way. So there is that. And I am going to go on to the next slide. Catherine.
Oh, I just wanted to invite you all to a Sunshine Week webinar on March 20th. We're gonna, you know, focus on the importance of open government. We'll spend a little bit of time on like how to do a public records request, and really explore how far we've come when it comes to transparency in government. I figure that March will give us enough time to kind of reflect on what's been happening at both the State House and in DC. And I hope you all can join us.
Catherine, I think this is you.
This is me again. Okay, so I got a number of emails where people are like, what is going on with redistricting? Well, as you know, we had that significant loss in November where we were not able to put citizens, not politicians, into the Ohio Constitution. Incredibly painful. And yet, we will be doing new voting districts this year for Congress. And so that will not happen until we get to the fall. The deadlines for congressional map making are September. Then there's one at the end of October, Halloween, by the way. And then there's one at the end of November. But just keep in mind that is coming up. We do have local redistricting that's happening in 2025. Cleveland just went through it. Nelsonville's going through it. So I'm going to urge you to come to our next huddle. This is the Fair District Huddle with our partners, you know, the League of Women Voters and AFL-CIO and the ACLU Ohio and others to join us for this huddle where we'll be talking about local redistricting as well. And then there was a win in Los Angeles for a local redistricting, Citizens Redistricting Commission. So we'll talk about that as well. And so please join us, and I will pass it on to you, Mia, because I think the next slide is yours.
All right. Well, it's a lot to talk about what has happened since January 20th. There's a lot of things that have happened, and we can't possibly address them all here, but somebody shared with me, there's a Reddit kind of group for federal employees. And after the email went out to those millions of federal employees offering them to resign, folks started chatting in that group. And if you're looking for something to just kind of make you feel better for a few minutes, I would recommend reading it. So you do actually, I believe, have to have a Reddit, be signed up for Reddit in some way in order to access it, but that's just making an account like anything else, just your email. And it's, you know, what's inspiring about it is it's a lot of folks who were feeling kind of down, but they're getting strength and solidarity and energy from each other. And they are also talking about the, you know, that they care about the jobs that they do, that they took an oath, that they mean it, that they're helping people, that they, you know, they're just some really touching commentary. You can see an example, you serve the country, they serve a man. So kind of it gives you energy when you read a bunch of people beginning to feel stronger in with the solidarity that they kind of get from each other. So that's just something that I thought I would share in case folks are interested. Obviously, there's a lot that's happened that really affects all of us. I think that, you know, no matter what the topic is, you can call your member of Congress, even if you know your member of Congress, your senator is on board with the Trump agenda, you can still call them. It still makes a difference. Somebody that I know yesterday went to visit their congressman, and the person at the front desk had a just little Post-it notes of all the calls that they were getting. And now this is someone who's probably going to vote with the Trump agenda, but there they were taking down the notes from people and what they were saying about these issues. So we can call and say, how dare you on, you know, shake the foundations of our country with getting rid of the federal workers that are checking to make sure our water and our food is good, that are working at the airports to make sure that they're safe, that are making sure folks get their Social Security payments and all of the other things. So I really encourage you to call and speak to people in those offices, regardless of whether we think that we can win on those issues right now. It's still important to speak out. Common Cause National has an action about birthright citizenship. That's a you know, something that would really change this country in a not for the better. So we encourage you to take action there. One that is really kind of something that Common Cause cares a lot about, the firing of the inspector generals. And I do encourage you to read these links here. So, I mean, what is Trump doing when he's firing the inspector generals? Inspector generals are basically folks that are embedded in different government agencies to root out corruption and misconduct and, you know, bad spending of money, and they save us billions of dollars every year. What on earth would be the purpose of firing them all in the middle of the night with no notice, if it isn't essentially to set up the infrastructure for fraud and corruption, to be able to do whatever you want without anybody looking over your shoulder or checking to see what you're doing? Now, the fact that the firings themselves were illegal because they are supposed to come with a detailed report and they have to give Congress 30 days notice. The problem right now is that Trump doesn't really care if what he does is illegal because he got permission from the Supreme Court to do things that are illegal. If it's in, you know, as part of being president. So I don't think they're really worried. I mean, of course, there are court cases that are being filed, but this is, again, something that we should take action about. We are sharing with you a little video, which we thought was inspiring and also gives you guidance on how to push back on this issue. One last thing I'll mention, the federal funding freeze. We pushed back and we won. We didn't win entirely. Yes, they rescinded that freeze, but they're still trying to freeze funding that has anything to do with DEI or other things that, you know, the Trump administration is against. So I don't think we want to take that as like 100% victory. Yes, it's good to know that there was a big outcry and they officially rescinded that order, but that doesn't mean that we have to keep pushing, we have to keep watching, and we have to keep paying attention. But a daily call to your member of Congress is not too much, considering the stakes that we're facing right now. Ariel, you have your hand up.
Foreign aid is still frozen, isn't it? And that's really important.
They made a few exceptions. They had stopped funding for HIV medications, and they did change that. But everything is frozen. And we're going to talk about messaging a little bit later, but one thing that, we have learned, we have to learn about messaging. We're not, messaging experts necessarily, but when you say pause or freeze, it sounds very temporary, but the fact right now is that the money's just been taken away. It's been stopped. And so the people who need those things don't have them. So, we're trying to talk about it in terms of who's been harmed, the effect, and the needed thing being taken away as opposed to frozen. But yes, you're right. Foreign aid is still frozen for the most part. All right. Yeah, so this is about the messaging. Catherine, do you want to talk about this?
So why don't I start? But Mia, I'm hoping you can jump in too.
Sure.
I always think we're living in times that it feels complicated to think about how do we talk to others about what's going on. I think, some of this goes back to like naming the action, being very clear about it being a power grab, being very clear about, well, as opposed to using, jargon, just talking about, well, how does this hurt people? How does it impact all of us? What does it do to folks' everyday's lives? What is the harm? Because we are people that love stories. Narrative is incredibly important. I highly encourage us, as if we can. There was a comment in the chat about House Bill 6, for example, and thinking, House Bill 6 and other things, but thinking about, well, what's the story there? And the story is somebody who's paying more on their electricity bill who can't buy other things. And that's happening in home after home after home. And so we're talking about seniors, we're talking about people who are very poor. And so really highlighting how that policy change benefited the people in power. Larry Householder got the people he wanted in power. Some of those people are still in power, and it benefited the very wealthy. It benefited First Energy, it benefited AEP, it benefited the utilities. It ran ramshot over the Public Utilities Commission that's intended to be there for consumers. One of the things they say is don't rely on legal kinds of arguments, just, talk from your heart. I think that's incredibly important. The other thing is, that whole like not focusing on one person as the bad actor, because often it's a system-wide problem with multiple bad actors. And it's about authoritarianism. It's about billionaires doing what's best for them and not for what we need. And so I love this. Milch, you're absolutely right. I think one of the things that we need to be thinking about is like, how do we actually become experts at talking about all these things? Because for many of us, for years, we talked about, the importance of democracy, but what we need to be able to do is talk about, well, how does this impact us? How does this impact our communities? And how can we make sure that we have a government that works for all of us? And with that, Mia, I'm sure there are other things you wanted to add about kind of communications, or maybe there's somebody else who wants to jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy to have others jump in, but I think, all of this, if I think people think of the federal government as this, sort of far away thing, but it isn't far away. Again, making sure that we have food that's safe to eat, and that when we get on an airplane, that, it's safe, and making sure that people have their, whether it's support for schools. I think I saw a figure, it's like a third of our economy in Ohio is based on federal funding, whether it's schools or public universities or, anything. So trying to find something about helping people and the people who are going to be harmed is really important. And all of this thing about tax benefits for billionaires, as if they need more money. And that's what this is all about. So yeah.
So one of the things I was going to say, Mia, is that we have this lovely person that works for Common Cause. Her name's Raylin, and she's done some work on talking to folks who brainwashed is the wrong word, but are in a different camp, or aren't thinking about these in a similar fashion, or are believing disinformation. And so she's done a little bit of work on like talking to folks. And what I found the most interesting, and we'll make sure we share this in the follow-up, was that a lot of our time talking with folks like that involved listening and doing a little bit of reframing, and reframing to the things that we care about, and back to what is in our heart. And we'll make sure that we share that in the follow-up. Because as Sue said, telling them they're brainwashed doesn't work.
Yes.
So we need to listen and talk and
right,
really give an opportunity for a conversation, which is why I picked this picture. Was it really has to be a conversation.
And Annie, we will definitely send you a list of actions and any of these things that are upsetting you, that are unsettling our government. I mean, that's another way to look at it. I didn't capture it, I should have, but I saw a little meme that was, if a foreign country came to the US and tried to fire all our federal workers and freeze all our funding and essentially destabilize our government, and the functioning of our country, we would consider it war. It's an attack on our nation. So I think that's one way to look at it in your head, although we're saying talk about it in terms of the impacts on people. Anyway, I'm going to move on because we still have more to cover. And we're going to turn it over to Kelly.
Hey, everyone. We also, it's so difficult because we try and grapple with all the high level philosophical points of what's going on, but then we also have to really take deep dives into the procedures and the policies that are driving, particularly our elections. And so we, just in the past few weeks, Secretary LaRose has sent out the announcement that the voter list maintenance is continuing. So that is an ongoing process that identifies outdated registrations through national change of address and inactive voting activity for 6 years. And so that is happening. There won't be any changes to the voter rolls for this process before the May primary, but this would be something that would, inactive voters would be sent notifications, or potentially affected voters would be sent notifications and would have opportunities to correct it, to register. But this would take effect in September. So we are watching that. We'll keep our eyes on that. We do also know that because of the Data Act and the new directives that Secretary LaRose has put in place, they are updating their election official manual, and they are increasing the routine maintenance. There will be a lot of requirements on boards of elections to use and update the data more frequently, sometimes on a weekly basis. And they're really honing in on updating and maintaining citizenship status in the ways that they think they're able to. We received notice and watched the first hearing of Senate Bill 4, which happened yesterday. And this is a bill that is being sponsored by Teresa Gavarone, Senator Gavarone, and it would codify the Public Integrity Unit through the Secretary of State, which is what's been functioning for the past couple of years to investigate some of the challenges that that folks are seeing, but it's problematic in a few different ways. First, we don't know how much is being spent to run this unit already. Senator Gavarone could not provide that information, and we know that this would allow anyone suspecting voter fraud to just be able to, to send in an alert to the unit and, that they would investigate. It also really doubles down on the Attorney General authority to prosecute it if the local prosecutors don't want to take it up. And so we saw this happen last year where the county prosecutors would receive and review cases. They would decide to not prosecute, and then Secretary LaRose came out and said, no, we need to follow up on this. And Attorney General Yost did in several cases. So something we're watching. We know, on a state level, we're seeing changes to our election systems. And then also on a federal level, there has been the reintroduced SAVE Act, which is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. And, this was in play in the last session, and it is really, as it's being reintroduced into the House, again, would provide requirements for documenting proof of citizenship at every time someone needs to register or move, even within state. Obviously, there could disenfranchise just millions of voters, older voters who may not have a birth certificate, younger voters who move constantly, just voters without the income or the means to, maintain their passports or, their documents. And it's just really harmful and really based on a lot of election denialism and conspiracy theories that really aren't true. So again, we're dealing with a situation where there are already federal and state laws that require that only Americans can vote. There are harsh penalties for folks that do it. And so, something we're watching, something we're looking at, and we have an action later on that we can talk about with that. We have, most of you, I'm sure, where there is a May 6th primary. So we will be gearing up and working through next month, talking about, the structure of the primary. There will be a statewide amendment on the ballot. And so that's an infrastructure bill for obligation bonds that will be up to voters, statewide. And so we'll have more information on that. We encourage anyone, if you are, I know many on this call already joined these calls, but the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, does meet twice a month, and we work for voter advocacy, voter education. We also have partners, that work in coalition with us. And so I don't know if, I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention if Mia's or someone's able to share these, but Honesty for Ohio Education has shared a bill tracker with Rachel Coyle's help. And so we we're working together to monitor the situation, to see how we can help our partners and do what we can to, to all join forces and stay on top of everything. So we encourage anybody who's interested, to join that. And I know we have lots of actions and event reminders coming up in the next couple slides.
Well,
Actions and event
I noticed
reminders.
that, yeah, I was gonna say, I noticed that Travis had a question about age. Travis, did you want to
Oh.
throw in a comment?
Yeah, I do. I'm wondering why we don't have anything on that. Why is it that we're having somebody like Dave Yost, who's almost in the 70s, like where we have Mike DeWine, who's basically 80 right now, and then why? Like, I know they booted like Maureen O'Connor out for or she couldn't run for judge again for 8 because of age. Why are we not doing that to the governor or anybody in the state legislature? And it's just really bugging me with that one.
It is an interesting discrepancy that we age out judges and we don't age out legislators. And of course, I always think age is it's a complicated thing. Clearly wisdom with age, and yet age also can be incapacitating and can mean that people are out of touch. I think it's an interesting challenge.
Okay. I wouldn't mind seeing like an amendment or something put on there to where we can say, once you're done with your political office, you're done.
This reminds me of the term limits conversation. So I'm going to show my age, Travis. So in 1992, when we passed the term limits for the Ohio House and the Ohio Senate, there was a real hope that that meant, hey, folks would be paying more attention to their own constituents. They wouldn't be paying as much attention to, the state house politics and dynamics. They would be worrying about their own folks. And it has been, it's hard to call it a nightmare, but it really, when we think about what's happened with term limits, we both know it's not been effective because of the folks that want to retain power seem to kind of bounce back and forth. And for the, and the turnover means that we also have a heavy reliance on lobbyists. So, one of the things I'm really interested in the conversation. I'm not exactly sure where I come down on it. Bill Davis, you have your hand up.
Jump in, Bill.
I don't know how it got up. It was an accident.
Oh, okay. No worries.
All right.
Well, I think we are ready to move on. This is kind of a repeat of, we've talked about all these things, but this is just the links. Kelly, do you want to go through these?
Sure. I'm probably not coordinated enough to go through them and drop the links in, but I don't know that we hit on this one, but we do have a common cause action to condemn the January 6th pardons. We didn't even talk about that. That now seems like a lifetime ago, even though it's been about 10 days. But we have that. We have, as we mentioned, we have the action to send a letter to Congress about the SAVE Act. We have the statewide effort where organizations, leaders, individuals are all signing on to a letter opposing the new state house rules to, try and reduce transparency and ability for us to function at the state house. We have that House Bill 6 information, which is the form where you can sign up to get hard copy forms if you have in-person events. And then I've also made a note that we will follow up with the digital. We will provide a digital link so everyone can distribute, to their email groups. So we appreciate that. The inspectors generals, I found a woman online who I thought did a really nice job putting together why it's important and a script of what to do when you could call the Senate committee overseeing this situation. And so that video will be included with instructions if you want to take action there. And then we have the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition meeting. The next one will be next week on February 7th. And then it's every other Friday after that at noon. noon, if you're able to make that and interested in voting education and advocacy, which I know everyone on this call is. We also would invite you to participate in the Fair Districts Huddle. That is February 12th at 6 p.m. And then to look forward to something, as I do see sunshine this morning and the past couple days have been so nice, but we will celebrate Sunshine Week in March. That's the week of, it'll be on March 20th. And I believe that's also at 6 p.m. We'll have a webinar and look into greater transparency in government. So we hope by providing, a couple actions, and if you're, you may be interested in one, or you could do one a day, or take your time and process, through now that January is almost over to the start of February. But we appreciate, all your efforts, and obviously everybody's already making calls, and really thank you for all your activity already.
Yay.
I think
Many
that's it.
things
That's
to
the end of the
do.
slides. Whew.
That is the end of the slides. So we had, at some point, we had over 100 folks on this call. And if everyone is making calls and sending emails, I do think that is meaningful. And, keep up with your letters to the editor. Don't let this feel normal. None of this is normal. We will be here again. We'll send you a link for our next coffee, and we'll always be sending you, ideas of things to do, ways to take action, ways to be involved. And we appreciate and value your participation and engagement.
Well, I have to say that one of the things that gives me hope is events like this, where there's so many people here thinking and talking about ways that we can improve things. I appreciate the opportunity to get together and start our day thinking about how we can take action and take charge. I also know that we all need some time also to step back and take good care of ourselves. So I also encourage all of us, we're living in frankly overwhelming times. So make sure you give yourself time and space and a little time with cats and dogs and your kids, and going outdoors, and all the different ways that we refresh ourselves. So I'm incredibly grateful to you all. And then we'll send you a follow-up. Let us know, what you'd like to talk about next time. I know we didn't get to every topic, and I apologize about that. But if you have ideas for what you want to talk about in February, please let me know. And with that, anything,
everyone.
final words, Kelly?
Nope, just thanks everyone, and we're moving on to February.
February.
Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
All right, be well.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.